Guinea's referendum, a new constitution, old patterns. Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV, where we unmask power and inspire change. I'm Zainab Karoma. Today, we turn our spotlight on Guinea, where a controversial referendum has sparked fierce debate. Is this a path back to democracy or a constitutional shortcut for military rule? Stay tuned, because what happens in Guinea could reshape not just one country, but the entire region. On 21st September 2025, Guinea held a referendum on a draft constitution that expands presidential powers, changes term limits, allows military leaders to run for the presidency, and creates a Senate with 1/3 of its members appointed by the executive. The country's military leader, General Mamadi Doumbouya, who seized power in a coup in September 2021, is at the center of controversy over whether this move is a step toward civilian rule or a long-term entrenchment of military-backed rule. What changed on Changteu or in Astache was new. Here are some of the changes proposed and largely approved in preliminary results. Presidential term extended from 5 to 7 years, renewable once. Military figures, including Doumbouya himself, would be allowed to stand for election. A Senate is created, 1/3 of its seats to be directly appointed by the president. What remains? Troubling. Opposition suppression. The main opposition figures and parties, for example, Chilo Delaine Diallo, Alpha Condé, were suspended. Some have called for a boycott. Media restrictions and information asymmetry, with limited ability for no campaign voices to broadcast widely, low literacy in parts of the country, and active promotion of the yes side via rallies, posters, etc., Guinea's citizens may not have had a balanced picture. Missed deadlines. Doumbouya's junta had committed to returning to civilian rule by end 2024. That deadline was missed. Elections have now been set for December 2025. What actually happened in the vote preliminary results indicate a very strong yes vote. Over 90% in favor, with turnout in over 80% of polling stations, around 91.4%. This clears the required 50% turnout threshold. Critical analysis. So, is this move a genuine transition toward democracy or a veiled power grab? The evidence suggests both, but with leanings toward the latter. 1. Legitimacy versus real power shift. The referendum gives the form of a constitutional process, but legitimacy isn't just form. With opposition parties suspended, media constrained, critics silenced, the process inclusiveness is shallow. A constitution is not democracy, especially if certain voices are excluded. 2. Doumbouya's promise and the unmet deadline. It's not the first time that promises to return to civilian rule have come with timelines. Missing deadlines weakens trust. The December 2024 promised handover didn't materialize. Setting elections for December 2025 may help restore some confidence if those elections are free, fair, and inclusive. 3. Checks and balances. Extending term lengths, allowing the military to run for office, increasing appointee positions in the Senate. All of these change the balance of power in favor of the executive junta. Unless offset by strong judicial independence, media freedom, and genuine political competition, these institutional changes risk concentrating power. 4. Public sentiment and participation. Reports, e.g. Afrobarometer data, show many Guineans express dissatisfaction with the direction of the country and desire for earlier return to civilian rule. Still, turnout and vote proportions suggest either strong popular support or a lack of credible alternatives, fear, suppression, lack of access to information. 5. Regional and international pressure and influence. Guinea isn't isolated. There is increasing awareness from ECOWAS, the African Union, international human rights organizations, and foreign investors. The pressure to legitimize governance, to restore investor confidence, is real. But that can produce half measures rather than full democratic transitions. Africa-wide comparison. Similar cases, different outcomes. To understand Guinea in context, we need to compare with other African nations that have followed somewhat similar paths, sometimes with different dynamics and outcomes. Country military takeover, Chachardetsta, coup year, constitutional change allowing military in politics, term extensions or similar executive enlargements, outcomes/notes, Mali, 2020 and earlier coups. Yes, junta influences strong, new charters, transitional governments, various adjustments, frequent suspensions of term constraints, continued instability, international sanctions, weak democratic institutions. Burkina Faso, 2022 coup, military and transitional charters. Political participation restricted. Executive power is strong. Term limits are unclear in transitional phases. Competing juntas, security crises, weak institutions. Niger, 2023, coup transitional charter. Strong influence of military and governance. Term limits and executive powers are in flux. International reactions. Pressure from ECOWAS, but democratic outcome uncertain. Guinea, 2025-2021, coup proposed constitution explicitly allows military to run. Term extended, new Senate appointments by president. Preliminary results strongly, yes, but questions about fairness remain. From this, patterns emerge. When militaries seize power, one frequent response is to produce a new constitutional or legal framework to legitimize what has already happened, rather than to meaningfully dial back military control. Term extensions, power concentration in the executive, and limiting opposition or media freedoms are common tools. Outcomes vary depending on strength of civil society, international pressure, economic conditions, internal factionalism, and whether the military leadership is willing to let go of power. Forward-looking approach, what to watch, what to hope for. What comes next matters greatly. Here are the key indicators and possible trajectories for Guinea, and what the rest of Africa should be looking out for. Bonus, ways Guinea could surprise us, for better or worse. What to watch 1. How the December 2025 elections are conducted. Will they be open to all parties, including those currently suspended? Will media have freedom? Will observers be allowed in? If not, the constitutional changes will look hollow. 2. Actions versus promises. Will restrictions on media, political parties, public dissent be eased? Transparency in the electoral body? Independent judiciary? It is easy to pass a constitution, far harder to live under one. 3. Turnover or continuity. Even if elections happen, will Doumbouya run? If yes, will he win? If no, will his preferred candidate or his allied military figures control power? Will term limits really be enforced? There is a risk of Doumbouya 2.0 by proxy. 4. Civil society and international responses, protests, NGOs, human rights watchers, their role could be decisive or repressed. Regime behavior under pressure from ECOWAS, African Union, UN, foreign donors will be telling, especially economic leverage. 5. Precedents and copycats. If Guinea's approach succeeds and is accepted regionally, it may embolden other military regimes to follow suit, rewriting constitutions under cover of legitimacy while retaining power. That could be a worrying trend. Possible paths for Guinea. Optimistic scenario. The new constitution helps normalize governance. Elections in December are relatively free and fair. Opposition parties are reinstated. Military withdraws from direct political competition. Guinea builds stronger institutions. International relations improve, economic investment increases. Pessimistic scenario. The Constitution becomes a tool for consolidating power. Opposition remains sidelined. Doumbouya or military-aligned candidates stay in power, possibly indefinitely. Democratic norms atrophy. Human rights abuses continue. Internal dissent is suppressed. Middle path. Some reforms occur. Symbolic gestures, partly open elections, but with persistent constraints. Guinea remains semi-authoritarian, but not fully democratic, maintaining both stability of sorts and repression in certain domains. Latest news as of September 2025. To bring things fully up to date, Provisional results show more than 90% voted yes in the referendum. Turnout in the reporting polling stations is reported around 91.4%, clearing the legal threshold. Legislative and presidential elections are scheduled for December 2025. The Electoral Authority is now the Directorate General of Elections, DGE, a body set up by the junta. There are concerns about its independence given how its leadership is appointed. Humor interlude, because wanting power is serious business. Imagine power like an apartment building. The coup is when someone storms the lobby, changes the locks, and says, "I'll redecorate." The Constitution rewrite is them painting the walls, adding some new furniture, maybe even a new bathroom, and then telling the tenants, "See, this is democracy. Now you can vote on the wallpaper." The key question, do the tenants still get to choose the building manager, or is it the same person who holds the key to the front door? Implications and lessons for Africa. Guinea is yet another case in the trend of military leaders seeking to embed their rule via constitutional legal means rather than via overt force alone. The legal veneer often aims to confer legitimacy both domestically and internationally. The role of turnovers in term limits, executive power, military participation in politics, and control of political institutions are central battlegrounds for democracy in many African states. The international community seems increasingly constrained. Sanctions or condemnation often follow, but enforcement or leverage is uneven. Also, some foreign actors may prioritize stability, resources, or strategic alliances over strict democratic norms. Civil society, media freedom, literacy/education, so citizens can understand constitutional changes, and monitoring by international observers remain hugely important. A constitution that no one sees, reads, or understands is like a map to a place nobody wants to visit. The referendum in Guinea likely passed given the strong reported yes vote and high turnout, under heavily controlled circumstances. The Constitution gives legal substance to what critics say has already been a consolidation of power. Whether this is a transition back to genuine civilian democratic rule or simply a transformation of military rule into constitutional form remains to be seen. The proof will be in December 2025. Who is allowed to run, whether the opposition is meaningful, whether civil liberties hold, and whether the international community holds responses consistent with democratic rules, or whether stability trumps everything else. Economic implications. Who invests in a moving target? Constitutions aren't just legal documents. They're also economic signals. Investors, lenders, and donors watch closely because a rulebook that changes every few years creates uncertainty. 1. Investor confidence. Mining sector. Guinea is rich in bauxite, iron ore, and gold. Bauxite alone makes it one of the top global producers. However, constitutional instability scares off long-term investors. Why commit to a 20-year mine when the political framework could change every 7? Infrastructure and energy. Mega projects, like railways and hydro dams, require stable contracts. If elections are delayed or the military's role expands, project financing could dry up or shift toward friends, think Russia, China, rather than Western lenders. 2. Aid and loans. Donors like the World Bank or IMF don't love uncertainty. They want reforms, anti-corruption, and governance benchmarks. A military-crafted constitution extending terms could put some funds on ice. But here's the paradox. If Guinea faces fiscal stress, the same institutions may quietly step back in because no one wants to see complete economic collapse in a fragile region. 3. The street view. Inflation, food insecurity, youth unemployment, these don't wait for constitutions. The danger is that ordinary Guineans, already under strain, see little material benefit from new rules of the political game. A constitution doesn't fill rice bowls. Humor. Sidebar. Imagine trying to pay for your groceries with a constitution. Sir, that'll be 200,000 Guinean francs. No problem. Here's Article 27 on presidential term extensions. Cashier, sir, please step aside. Foreign relations, France out, Russia in. Guinea's referendum also sends messages beyond Conakry. 1. France. Long the dominant influence in Francophone West Africa, France's role has shrunk after coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Guinea. Doumbouya has repeatedly distanced himself from Paris. Expect limited French involvement in Guinea's upcoming elections, except maybe as the favorite scapegoat for local propaganda. 2. Russia. Guinea, like its coup-born neighbors, has cultivated ties with Moscow. Expect more military cooperation, Wagner/Africa Corps security arrangements, and possibly economic deals tied to mining. For Moscow, Guinea is a foothold on the Atlantic and a strategic ally in resource politics. 3. ECOWAS. Here's the tightrope. ECOWAS condemned the coup in 2021, but has since struggled to enforce transitions. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger formed an alliance of Sahel states, drifting away from ECOWAS. Guinea is not officially part of that alliance, but the referendum and military entrenchment move it closer in spirit. This strains ECOWAS's credibility as a guardian of democratic norms. 4. Global partners. The US, EU, UN will issue statements. They already have. They may call for inclusion and free elections, but the leverage is limited unless backed by economic carrots or sticks, historical parallels in Africa, constitutions as elastic bands. Guinea is not alone in using constitutional reform to reset the rules of power. Let's recall Uganda, 2005. Yoweri Museveni removed term limits, still in power nearly 20 years later. Rwanda, 2015. Paul Kagame's referendum allowed him to potentially stay until 2034. It passed with 98% support. Congo-Brazzaville, 2015. Denis Sassou Nguesso extended term limits. He's still in power. Togo, 2024. Changed constitution to allow presidential succession via parliament, sparking protests. Chad, 2024-25. Military ruler Mahamat Idris Déby Itno orchestrated a constitutional referendum to extend his own control. Lesson: once constitutions are bent for one leader, they rarely snap back into shape on their own. Citizens may eventually force change through protest, ballot box, or unrest, but institutional backsliding is hard to reverse. Forward-looking regional impact. 1. If Guinea normalizes military rule, other military regimes may feel emboldened. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger could pursue similar constitutional adjustments. A new normal of military-designed constitutions might spread across the region. 2. If Guinea holds fair December 2025 elections, it could be a regional game changer, showing that a coup regime can hand power back through credible constitutionalism. But given history, skepticism is warranted. 3. Youth pressure. Across Africa, the median age is under 20. Youth demand jobs, education, digital inclusion, not endless debates about term extensions. If promises don't translate to improvements, street protests are almost guaranteed. ECOWAS and the shifting West African Security Order 1. The ECOWAS dilemma. ECOWAS was created to promote integration and safeguard democracy, but coups in Mali, 2020-2021, Guinea, 2021, Burkina Faso, 2022, and Niger, 2023, have tested its credibility. Sanctions, travel bans, and suspension of memberships were tried, with limited success. Problem: sanctions often hurt citizens more than juntas. Leaders use this to paint ECOWAS as anti-people and themselves as defenders of sovereignty. Result: ECOWAS risks being seen as a toothless bulldog, barking loudly but biting only its own citizens. 2. The Sahel Alliance factor. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger walked out of ECOWAS and formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, in 2023. They pledged mutual defense and closer integration, turning their back on Abuja's dictates. Guinea hasn't formally joined AES, but with Doumbouya cozying up to military peers, it wouldn't be surprising to see Guinea lean that way. That would redraw the security map of West Africa. ECOWAS in the south and coastlines, AES in the Sahel and interior. 3. Russia as the new patron. Russia has been the quiet winner in this tug of war. With France retreating, Moscow offers military hardware, mercenary advisors, and political backing at the UN. If Guinea edges toward AES, Russia gains yet another partner along the Atlantic coast, strategically invaluable. Humor sidebar. West Africa is starting to look like a football league. ECOWASFC versus AES United, with Russia as the surprise new coach shouting from the sidelines, "Press high, forget the French referee." 4. What's at stake for ECOWAS? Security coordination. Terrorism in the Sahel doesn't stop at borders. If AES and ECOWAS don't cooperate, militants benefit. Economic integration, ECOWAS's common external tariff and free movement protocols may be undermined by defections. Democratic norms. If Guinea's referendum becomes a template, ECOWAS's credibility as democracy's referee in the region may collapse. Domestic risks in Guinea. Between streets and palaces. 1. Youth unrest. Guinea's median age is 18. Many young Guineans are jobless, frustrated, and digitally connected. They can smell manipulation. If December 2025 elections feel staged, protests are likely. And unlike old elites, the youth have nothing to lose. 2. Civil society, Pushback Guinea, has a history of unions, student movements, and grassroots mobilization. Even under repression, social media gives oxygen to dissent. Expect hashtags, encrypted messaging campaigns, and possibly street demonstrations if opposition remains excluded. 3. Ethnic and regional divides. Guinea's politics have long been colored by ethnic affiliations. Fulani, Malinka, Susu. If opposition leaders from certain groups remain barred, resentment could flare along communal lines, deepening fractures. 4. Security force loyalty. A critical unknown. Will the military remain united behind Doumbouya? If factions emerge, Guinea could face internal instability. History shows coups often breed counter-coups, especially when constitutional legitimacy looks shaky. The double bind, transition or entrenchment. Here's the irony. If Doumbouya loosens his grip, reinstates parties, allows fair elections, he risks losing power. If he tightens his grip, it suppresses opposition, controls elections, he risks protests, unrest, and international isolation. It's the classic catch-22 constitution. Damned if you democratize, damned if you don't. Forward-looking questions. 1. Will Guinea remain in ECOWAS or tilt toward AES, potentially realigning the sub-region? 2. Can Doumbouya engineer a controlled democracy, a la Kagame or Museveni? Or will Guinea's social fabric resist such centralization? 3. Will ECOWAS learn from its missteps and reinvent itself? Or will it become a ceremonial club issuing stern press releases no one reads? Guinea's economic engine, Bauxite, Simandou, and the China Factor 1. Bauxite isn't just big. It's gigantic. Guinea is the world's bauxite workhorse right now, and 2025 has been explosive. In the first half of the year, bauxite exports surged to approximately 99.8 million tons, plus 36%, with Chinese firms controlling the majority of shipments. That followed a record first quarter, 48.6 million tons, plus 39% year over year, despite regulatory hiccups sidelining some operators. Translation: China's appetite is pulling Guinea's economy forward. Macro lens: even before the referendum, the World Bank flagged mining as Guinea's growth engine. GDP growth 7.1% in 2023, driven by a 22% bauxite surge and port capacity expansion. The structural risk, when one commodity and one buyer dominates, politics suddenly matters a lot to price and volume. Forward risk, and a joke, if your economy is a one-cylinder engine, you don't pour sand in it. Or constitutional controversy, investor due diligence meetings can only take so many. We'll get back to you after the referendum answers before they start getting back to somebody else. 2. Simandou, the iron ore mega project that bends markets. The Simandou project, Rio Tinto plus winning consortium plus Chinese partners, is on track to reshape global iron ore. First cargoes are expected around late 2025, with a ramp up toward approximately 120 million tons per year plateau. Infrastructure, approximately 600 to 670 kilometers of new multi-user railway, plus a deep water port, a whole new spine through Guinea. But safety and schedule risks, investigations reported dozens of accidents and over a dozen fatalities during port/rail construction between mid-2023 and late 2024. More recent incidents have intermittently disrupted works and nudged iron ore prices. Project governance, HSE standards, and emergency response capacity are now in the spotlight. Expect lenders and off-takers to demand tighter controls. Market implications. Even with Chinese steel demand wobbling, the sheer size of Simandou supply is game-changer territory and could recalibrate seaborne pricing, especially if Australian shipments wobble, cyclones, or if trade frictions persist. 3. The China dependency question. Chinese-controlled firms already ship a dominant share of Guinea's bauxite. Simandou gives Beijing a strategic iron ore foothold. In good times, that means investment, ports, rails, royalties. In tense times, it can mean concentration risk, pricing leverage, contract renegotiations, or political quid pro quo when security or governance issues spike. Policy takeaway for Conakry. Keep diversifying counterparties, Japan, India, EU mills. Hardwire HSE, community benefit sharing and transparency into mining codes and concession addenda. Protect the investment climate ahead of December elections, whoever runs, with stable tax royalty regimes and credible dispute resolution. Historical parallels. Guinea's referendum playbook, 1958 to 2001 to 2020 to 2025. Guinea has form when it comes to consequential referendums. 3 snapshots help decode 2025, 1958, the no that made a nation under Sékou Touré. Guinea famously voted no to de Gaulle's new French constitution, rejecting the French community and opting for immediate independence. France stripped assets and personnel in response. Guinea leaned toward the Eastern Bloc. The lesson: referendums can create abrupt geopolitical realignments with long economic aftershocks. 2001, the Elastic Constitution. A 2001 vote under Lansana Conté extended presidential terms and loosened limits, centralizing appointment powers and weakening checks. It normalized executive stretch under the veneer of legality. A precedent today's critics keep citing. 2020. Resetting term counts. Alpha Condé's 2020 constitutional overhaul effectively reset his term clock, paving the way for a controversial third-term path and unrest, dynamics that fed into the 2021 coup. This is the immediate cautionary parallel. Constitutional redesigns that serve incumbents tend to boomerang. 2025. Yes, under constraint, early tallies point to a 90% yes and 50% turnout threshold cleared, but with main opposition actors suspended and the no campaign mostly confined to social media. The draft extends the presidency to 7 years, allows military figures to run, and creates a Senate with presidential appointees, structuring power for a longer executive arc. Elections are signaled for December 2025. Pattern recognition: when constitutions are written amid asymmetric competition, boycotts, bans, media, limits, they tend to lock in the balance of power at that moment. Reversing those lock-ins later takes either elite pacts or popular shocks. Rarely tidy, never cheap. What smart stakeholders do now: a short, practical playbook. For Guinea's authorities, de-risk Simandou and Bauxite with auditable HSE upgrades, public incident reporting, and independent monitors. Short-term transparency beats long-term reputational drag. Signal electoral credibility, reinstate suspended parties, open media space, accredit observers early, and ring-fence the election management body from executive interference. Codify fiscal stability, commit to a no-surprises tax royalty regime through 2026 to keep capex flows steady during the political year. For ECOWAS and partners, tie any sanctions relief or financial support to verifiable election benchmarks. Party reinstatement, media access, observer mobility, rather than calendar promises alone. Coordinate with IFIS so that disbursement triggers reward concrete governance steps, not press releases. For investors, off-takers, hedge country and counterparty concentration. Build clauses for political process slippage, e.g., observer access, dispute timelines. Bake in living wage, safety, and community benefit metrics. They're not CSR window dressing, they're risk controls at Simandou scale. A quick humor breather. If constitutions were kitchen recipes, Guinea's 2025 version adds 2 extra eggs, longer terms, a pinch of military spice, eligibility, and a presidential frosting layer, Senate appointees. The cake will definitely rise. The question is whether everyone gets a slice or just the chef. What we're watching next and why it matters to your wallet, not just your civics teacher. 1. December 2025. Election integrity checklist, party reinstatement, observer access, media space, credible results tabulation. These are the levers that will decide whether Simandou financing stays cheap or gets pricier. 2. Bauxite throughput versus social license. Rising exports are great until communities and workers say enough. Production lines hate roadblocks. So do debt covenants. 3. China's portfolio mix. If Guinea becomes the iron plus aluminium hub for Chinese supply chains, policy risk will be priced in both Beijing and Conakry, and you'll see it in offtake terms. Scenarios for 2025 to 2027. What could happen next and what each path means. 1. Best case, managed opening. Politics. The junta reinstates suspended parties and media outlets. Credible observers are accredited. December 2025 polls proceed competitively. The new Senate's presidential appointments aren't abused. Doumbouya either doesn't run or runs and accepts transparent results. Elections were signaled for December 2025 after the September 21 referendum. 8. Economy and investment, financing costs ease. Simandou stays on the accelerated track to first ore in November 2025 to early 2026 with tighter HSE standards after recent fatality probes. What you'd see: fewer project stoppages, continued bauxite outflows, H1 2025 exports approximately 99.8 million tons plus 36% year over year, and healthier port to rail uptime. Jargon-free takeaway: investors stop clutching their pearls. Citizens start clutching paychecks. 2. Base case, controlled pluralism. Politics, December elections are held but under constraints. Opposition space still limited. The newly approved Constitution's 7-year presidential term and military eligibility remain lightning rods. Provisional referendum tallies show 90% yes and turnout above the legal threshold, while opposition boycotts undercut legitimacy. Economy and investment, money flows continue, but with higher political risk premiums. Simandou's first shipment target is technically met, but recurring HSE/permit headlines keep lenders' lawyers caffeinated. What you'd see: strong mining exports, occasional protests, lots of promises about reforms after the elections. 3. Worst case, entrenchment and blowback. Politics, opposition and media remain muzzled. December polls slide or become a coronation. ECOWAS pressure rises while public anger spills into streets. Parties were suspended ahead of the vote. Civic space concerns flagged by rights orgs and the UN echo through coverage. Economy and investment. Simandou schedules slip. HSE backlash widens after prior reports of 12 worker fatalities and 40 accidents in 2023 to 2024. Bauxite logistics occasionally jam. What you'd see: higher funding costs, insurance premia up, community roadblocks, constitutional law meets axle grease. Humor pit stop. Constitutions are like phone updates. Best case, new features, battery life improved. Worst case, your apps crash and you can't find the settings menu. Africa-wide comparison, where Guinea sits on the new rulebook spectrum. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. Military-led transitions with re-engineered legal frameworks and strained ties with ECOWAS turn toward Russia for security partnerships. Guinea's referendum, extending terms to 7 years and allowing soldiers to run, looks ideologically adjacent to that club, even if its coastal economy and mining profile differ. Chad, Uganda, Rwanda, historical parallels. Term limit adjustments that entrenched incumbents under legal cover. Guinea's risk is copying the form, votes, courts, new chambers, without the substance. Open competition, checks. Wildcard peers, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Senegal. Recent electoral churn shows street pressure and independent courts still matter in West Africa, hinting that even entrenched frameworks can be contested if civic space survives. Signals to watch, so you can call the score early. 1. Election body Independence Guinea created a Directorate General of Elections, DGE, in June 2025. Track how leadership is appointed, whether party observers are accredited, and who audits the voter roll. 2. Opposition and media space pre-referendum suspensions were real. Look for legal reinstatements, license renewals, and fewer arbitrary bans between now and December. 3. Referendum aftermath metrics, provisional result, 90% yes with reported turnout around 91% at 80% of stations, numbers that pass the threshold but invite scrutiny. Will courts publish granular polling station data? 4. Simandou milestones and HSE fixes. Oh, does the first OR window hold? November 2025. Oh, do independent monitors publish incident stats after Reuters reporting on fatalities and 40 accidents? 5. Bauxite, throughput versus social license. If exports keep setting records, H1 99.8 million tons, Q1 48.6 million tons. Do community benefits and refinery commitments scale too? Or do tensions flare along port/rail corridors? What this means for ordinary Guineans and your audience. Near term, prices and jobs track mining output more than constitutional clauses. If rail/port uptime is high and HSE improves, wages and small business activity around mining hubs rise. Yes, legal reforms matter, but rice costs money, not Latin phrases. Medium term, if December polls are credible, capital gets cheaper. If not, you'll see pricier debt and more opaque deals with fewer public benefits. Long term, the quality of this transition, real pluralism versus permanent managed rule, will shape education, health, and diversification beyond rocks and rails. Tiny humor interlude. Guinea's new constitution offers longer terms and a bigger executive role. It's like upgrading to the Presidential Plus plan. Unlimited minutes, fewer dropped calls from the opposition. Probability-weighted scenarios for Guinea, 2026 to 2027, scenario probability, my estimate. Politics, economy, and mining risks signals managed. Opening 25% parties reinstated. December 2025 elections broadly credible. Doumbouya steps back or accepts defeat. Simandou on track. Bauxite exports remain strong. Lower risk premia. Limited unrest. Strong donor and ECOWAS support. Opposition rallies allowed. Observer reports positive. Concessional lending resumes. Controlled pluralism. 50%. Elections held but constrained. Military stays central. Opposition weakened but not outlawed. Simandou first OR, November 2025, hits target. HSE probes continue. CapEx flows but with caveats. Civic protests flare but contained. Investors demand higher yields. Mixed observer reports. Social media activism up. Mining contracts renegotiated quietly. entrenchment, and blowback. 25% elections delayed or stage managed. Opposition suppressed. ECOWAS tension rises. Simandou delays. HSE/community conflicts widen. Bauxite logistics face blockages. Mass protests. Possible counter-coup, donor sanctions, bond spreads widen, reports of arrests, polling stations quiet with 95% plus turnouts. ECOWAS threatens new sanctions. Takeaway, base case is semi-authoritarian continuity, but either of the tales, opening or blowback, could redefine Guinea's trajectory, and the mining sector is the canary in the coal mine. Africa-wide scoreboard, term limit engineering. Since 2000 country years of change mechanism, short-term effect, medium-term outcome, Uganda, 2005, term limit scrapped. 2017, age cap removed. Parliamentary amendments. Museveni kept running still in power, 2025. Protests suppressed. Donor fatigue, Rwanda, 2015. Referendum. Reset clock extended to 2034, 98% approval. Kagame still dominant. Some stability, but political space narrow, Congo-Brazzaville, 2015, referendum term limits, relaxed. Sassou Nguesso continued, authoritarian stability, stagnant economy. Togo, 2019, 2024, amendments shifting power, enabling dynastic control street protests. Arrest Gnassingbé dynasty still entrenched, Chad, 2018, 2023, 2024. New constitution plus junta referendum, Deby Jr. consolidates military dominance. Shaky legitimacy, Guinea, 2001, terms extended. 2020, reset for Condé. 2025, 7-year term plus military eligibility. Referenda under constrained opposition. Incumbents strengthened 2021 coup after 2020 reform backlash. 2025 outcome still unfolding. Pattern. Constitutions are being used as elastic bands, stretched to fit whoever's in power. Elastic, though, snaps when pulled too far. Ask Condé in 2021. Advice to African leaders. 1. Don't confuse legality with legitimacy. A constitution rewritten for your benefit might be legal, but citizens know the difference between rules for everyone and rules for you. 2. Invest in literacy, not just loyalty. Over half of Guineans can't read. They rely on elites for interpretation. That's a governance vacuum. If people don't understand the Constitution, they won't defend it or respect it. 3rd, term limits are not your enemy. They're your safety net. Leaders who leave at their peak, Mandela, Kufuor, become icons. Those who cling, Bongo, Mugabe, Condé, become cautionary tales. 4, regional solidarity matters. ECOWAS loses credibility each time leaders alter constitutions for personal gain. African unity means defending democracy even when it's inconvenient. 5. Think economics, not just politics. Investors don't price speeches, they price risk. A shaky constitutional order raises borrowing costs, delays projects, and bleeds jobs. Key messages. Summary. Guinea's 2025 referendum. Extending presidential terms to 7 years, letting soldiers run, and creating a president-appointed Senate, passed by 90%, yes, but under conditions of opposition boycotts and suppressed media. December 2025 elections are the real test. Without inclusive competition, the Constitution risks being a tool of entrenchment, not transition. Guinea's economy depends heavily on bauxite. H1 2025, approximately 99.8 million tons, plus 36% year over year. And the Simandou iron ore mega project, first ore expected late 2025. Political credibility will determine whether these flows fuel prosperity or more protests. Across Africa, constitutional tweaks to extend terms have historically led to short-term incumbency, long-term instability. Guinea risks repeating that cycle. The choice is clear. Leaders can either govern by consent or by contract clauses written in their own favor. One path builds nations, the other builds resentment. Final word, constitutions should be the people's insurance policy against arbitrary power, not the leader's insurance policy against early retirement. African leaders would do well to remember, you can stretch the elastic, but when it snaps, it rarely hits the opposition. It hits you. Thank you for watching The Bold African Voice, BAV. Guinea's referendum may be over, but the real test comes in December's elections. And Africa is watching. What do you think? Is this democracy on trial or military rule rebranded? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into Africa's most pressing issues. Remember, together we make the difference. Until next time, stay bold, stay informed,